Hello, YouTube. Today, I would like to talk to you about the national debt. What is it? How much do we owe? And who do we owe? Without further ado, let's find out. One second. Okay, this here is from treasury.gov. National debt. What is the national debt? The term national debt refers to direct liabilities of the United States government. There are several different concepts of debt that are at various times used to refer to the national debt. Public debt is defined as public debt securities issued by the U.S. Treasury. U.S. Treasury securities primarily consist of marketable Treasury securities, i.e., bills, notes, and bonds, saving bonds, and special securities issued to state and local governments. A portion of debt held by the public and a portion of debt held by the government accounts. Debt held by the public excludes the portion of the debt that is held by government accounts. Gross federal debt is made up of public debt securities and a small amount of security issued by government agencies. Debt held by the public is the most meaningful of these concepts and measures the cumulative amount outstanding that the government has borrowed to finance deficits. The Bureau of Fiscal Services publishes on its website, treasurydirect.gov, daily public debt totals where you can search by a specific date, monthly statements of public debt, facts about the public debt, full listing of public debt reports. So there you go. It's broke down from public and debt held by the federal government. Now here's where it starts to get juicy. 5 facts about the national debt. What you should know. This is from Pew Research Center, the gold standard in research. With the Republican-led House engaged in a stare-down with the Senate Democrats and President Obama over raising the federal debt limit, it seems an opportune time to dig into the actual numbers describing the national debt, the debt limit, and interest payments on the national credit line. As of September 30th, the federal government total debt is about $17 trillion, according to the Treasury Department's monthly reckoning. Nearly all of it is subject to the statutory debt ceiling, which is currently set at a hair under $17 trillion. As a result, look at that, it's just over. As a result, at the end of September, there are just $25 million in unused debt capacity remaining. The debt is about equal to the gross domestic product, GDP, which is 16.661 trillion in the second quarter. The government's first read on GDP for the third quarter, which ended September 30th, isn't due till the end of the month, but it's likely to be delayed because of the federal shutdown. Debt as a share of the GDP has risen steeply since the 2008 financial crisis. Okay, and here's a breakdown. Components of the debt subject to limit fiscal year 96-2013. It's really hard to find rate to up to date debt. So some of this might be a couple years old, but the who we owe isn't any different. Government debt is perhaps the most widely held class of security in the world. As of the end of September, 28.4% of the debt, about 4.76 trillion, was owed to another arm of the federal government itself. How odd. So nearly 30% of what we owe is owed to the government itself. So let me get this straight. If I borrow money from me, why do I have to pay it back if I am me? It should make no motherfucking sense to me. It makes no fucking sense. The single biggest creditor, in fact, are Social Security's 2 trust funds, which together held 2.76 trillion in special non-traded treasury securities, 16.5% of the total debt. Social Security revenues exceeded benefit payments for many years. The surplus was required by law to be invested in treasuries. Another big holder, the Federal Reserve System, which collectively held 2.1 trillion worth of treasuries, 12.4% of the total debt as of last week. The Federal's holding are included in the debt held by public category. Now, isn't that something? The debt held by the public, which it says up here, debt held by the public, where'd it go? Is the major factor. And yet that is actually held by the federal government. and put in a different category. Why would they do that? And what I noticed as I started researching into this is that all of it is basically government spending, obviously, but then they just take everything and disperse it around and change who supposedly is responsible for which percentage all over the place, just to I can't get to any other conclusion but for purposefully convoluting the conversation, purposefully misleading us, purposefully making us think other things than the truth, which is, who do we owe? Mostly ourselves. We should be able to write all that bullshit off, right? In fiscal 2013, which ended September 30th, net interest payments on the debt totaled 222.75 billion, or 6.23% of all federal outlays. The government paid out an estimated 420.6 billion in interest, but that included interest credited to Social Security and other government trust funds, as well as a relatively small amount of offsetting investment income. By comparison, debt services are more than 15% of federal outlays. In the mid-1990s, the share has fallen partially because lower rates have held down interest payments, but also because outlays have risen substantially, up 39.4% over the last decade, largely due to the Federal Reserve's aggressive efforts to keep interest rates low. The U.S. government is paying historically low rates on its debt. In fiscal 2013, we have to renegotiate for lower interest rates because the debt is forever increasing. And we're not going to ever get out of it anyway, because I'll show you in a minute, we're basically only paying the interest and the debt is ever accumulating. The U.S. government is paying historically low rates. In fiscal 2013, according to the Treasury Department, the average interest rate on the public debt was 2.43. Though you might think such low rates would dissuade investors from buying U.S. government debt, demand has until recently remained strong, but the ongoing debt crisis may be changing that, especially for the short-term securities. Though many people may believe that China owns our debt, this is what I was always told. As of July, the latest month available, China's treasury holdings amounted to about 1.28 trillion, or 7.6 of the total debt. China is, however, the United States' largest overseas creditor, ahead of Japan, which holds more than 1.1 trillion in treasuries. So there you have it. We were told that we owe China, but that's only 7.6% of the total debt goes to China. As I'll show you, a way larger portion goes to the Federal Reserve, which right here, debt owned by non-federal entities, even though we know that a lot of this is federal from what I just read by the Pew Research. But in here, 20% is the Federal Reserve. That's just one big ass bank. And even though it's called Federal Reserve, it is not owned by the federal government. So don't be fooled. So even if they're trying to mislead us and say that we owe China most of it, 7.6 don't compare to no 18% right here. And then foreign and international, which is supposed to be 45%, how come when you look at the numbers, it doesn't show that? It doesn't show this big discrepancy here. And that's another weird thing that I found when I researched this, is that I could never get the same numbers. I could never get the same percentages, the same answer on two different pages from the federal or from top research places. And that's very, very odd, isn't it? If we're told we owe somebody money and they can't even point to who we actually owe, why in the fuck do we owe them money? They can't outline exactly what they're spending it on. They can't outline exactly who we owe. Why do we owe them then? Can I just say, oh, the government owes me trillions of dollars? I have no idea why. I have no idea how, who, when, where, what. And yet they owe me. Here's supposed to be a total portion of total spending breakdown. And if you look here, the national defense budget, which is this line here, is forever going down and down and down. I thought, that's very curious, being as we're in a constant state of war and everyone knows that we're spending trillions of dollars, every couple months. How is that possible? Well, it's not. It's not real. Um, we're told here that 45% goes to foreign and international, 18 to Federal Reserve, 10% to other investors, 10% to mutual funds. Yet over here, when you see a breakdown of how much we're actually spending, the seems to be one of the largest portions of money we're spending is interest on the debt, and it's defense related. So if defense is the smallest of the things that we spend money on, explain to me why it's the largest of the interests that we spend money on. This shit makes no motherfucking sense, yo. It makes no sense. This shit was purposefully convoluted, purposefully misleading. And the reality is that they lose trillions of dollars. I mean, wasn't it a couple of years ago that the Pentagon just couldn't find some outrageous sum of money? I mean, it was like almost $10 trillion that they just didn't know where it was. And since then, it's happened more often. Like, I don't know if that was the first time or not, but I know that since then it's happened quite a few times in several different branches of the government and several different government entities. So bottom line is, who do we owe? It seems like we mostly owe ourselves, but that just basically means the banks. We're borrowing money from our own banks, and then we're supposed to pay it back. And whatever money that the government borrows, we also are supposed to pay that back, regardless if we agree with what they spend it on. Even though we have like thousands of F-35s just sitting on runways rusting away. We don't even use them in warfare. We use drones. They cost $1 billion a piece. I really, every single direction that I looked into this at made me more and more frustrated on not getting a straight answer and purposefully misleading. The runaround is very frustrating. And especially when we have to hear so much about how we're in debt to our eyeballs and all that. And it's only going to get worse. And especially as long as we stay at war. And, who even remembers what the fuck we're fighting for? Like if our goal is to win, then let's just fucking end that shit and get it over with. We don't need to be, going slow on this issue. We have a big ordinance we could be dropping on those motherfuckers, and we've already bought and paid for those. We've already bought and paid for that shit. So I really can't wrap my brain around what the fuck is going on. If anyone can make heads or tails of this, I'd like to hear it in the comments below. If you found this informative, subscribe, share. I thank you for listening. Until next time, have a good day, YouTube. Peace.